All right, so let's talk about x, baby. Means we're going to talk about algebraic notation. All right? So we need to learn some terminology about algebra before we begin, and here's how we do it. So let's get some terms straight here with algebraic notation. Suppose I have 6x cubed plus 7. All right. First of all, that's called an expression. An expression is anything with no equal sign. All right. If it does have an equal sign, 1 plus 1 equals 2. That's an equation. All right. But if I just want to say 1 plus x, that's an expression. So that's the difference between an expression and an equation. An equation has an equal sign with two things on both sides of it. They can be numbers or they can be letters. All right, so this expression is made up of two terms. And those two terms are 6x cubed is one term, and positive 7 is the other term. All right, so any expression is going to be one term, two term, three terms, or more. All right, let's go over the other bits of our expression here. 3, that is called the exponent. 3 is the exponent, so we don't confuse that with the term. That's just part of the term. 6 is what's referred to as the coefficient. The coefficient is the number that is multiplying next to the variable. So 6 is the coefficient. X, of course, any letter that represents a value in algebra is referred to as the variable. And finally, when we think about a number that doesn't have a letter attached to it, or a number that doesn't have a variable attached to it, that's referred to as a constant term, or just a constant term. 7 is a constant term. 7 will always be 7. It doesn't have any variable attached to it. To understand the difference between a constant term and a variable, like if I said, okay, x is going to be whatever card I turn over, I don't know what that card is going to be, so it's going to be x. That card is going to vary, right? It could be a 6, it could be a 5, it could be a 2, so x can vary. If I said x is going to be whatever card I pick, I don't know the value of that card, so it could be x. Whereas a constant term, that can't vary. 7 will always just be 7. So that's the difference between these two guys. So this expression here, I just want to go over this guy, x to the 4th minus y cubed. I want to know the coefficients of both those terms. Okay, so suppose I say I've got this expression, and I want to know the coefficient of that first term. Well, the first term is x to the 4th, and there's no number in front of it. And when there's no number in front of that variable, it's like an invisible coefficient. It's an invisible coefficient of 1. So even though it's not there, we have to assume that there's a 1 there. And the reason why, because when I write x, it's the same as writing 1x. Because 1 times x is the same as x. It's like saying, how many x's are there? There's 1 of them. And the coefficient of the second term, there's no number in front of that, so we put a 1 there. So the coefficient of that second term is negative 1. And likely, if I have a negative variable like this, that's the same as saying negative 1x. Alright, so that does not mean that x equals 1 and y equals negative 1. That doesn't mean that. It just means there's an invisible coefficient in front of there every single time. So if I said, what's the coefficient of that term there? It's going to be 1. Coefficient there is going to be negative 1. Moving on with algebra notation, we don't use a times sign or a division sign in our simplified expression. So our simplified expression here, we're going to stay away from the times sign and the divided by sign. Okay, so when we write these algebraic expressions, we just don't want to use a times sign or divided by sign. So 5 plus n, that's still just going to be 5 plus n, because there's no other sign for plus. 6 less than x, this one, the less than thing gets kind of tricky sometimes, because if I say 6 less than x, x has to come first, and I want 6 less than that. And I say sometimes think of, if I said 6 less than your age, well, your age would come first, and then you'd subtract 6. P divided by 10. Instead of a division sign, we're going to use a fraction bar. P divided by 10. 8 times 7. Now, remember, I don't want to use the time sign there. I don't want to use the time sign, so I'm going to say a times 7. I don't want that. I write it as the coefficient and the variable with no time sign. 7a means 7 times a. And we always put the coefficient first before the variable. B times a, that means b times a, but we don't write the time sign, so we write 2 letters ba. But to keep it cleaner, this one's not super important, but if I have 2 variables stuck together by a time sign, let's put it in alphabetical order, because that's just an easier, more pleasing to the eye way of doing it. And let's try double x. Double means 2 times x. And 2 times x means 2x. And if I have 2 less than triple x, triple means times 3. So triple x means 3 times x. 3 times x. And 2 less than that is going to be minus 2. Now here is one where I have a 2-term expression. These are all 1 term. Nope, that's 2 terms and that's 2 terms. But I've got a 2-term expression here, and I can't do anything.